Today's assignments for July 25th. You should first of all read the overview of the Explore Openly tab of Pragmatic Inquiry ePortfolio, and I'll explain that in a little more detail in a minute. We'll go over some of the important concepts. And then I'm going to talk about the next assignment, or the next two assignments, one of which is the Annotated Bibliography, and the second one is the Stakeholder Analysis paper. So I'm going to go to the portfolio. Normally in the past I've had a bunch of tabs open, but I'm going to show you how to do that. So I go up to Digication at the top of the D2L page. It's a tab right there. I like to right click it and open link in new tab, just so you always know where you are and where you've been. So this is the Pragmatic Inquiry ePortfolio, and we are looking at the Explore Openly tab and the overview section right here. And you'll notice the assignment, the bibliography, and the stakeholder analysis paper are right below it. So this is basically an image of the different perspectives that we're going to be taking. There is the personal, so how you engage this challenge question. Then you're going to look at it from an organizational perspective. What are the organizations that are attempting to address this issue? You're going to look at it from a market perspective. All of that is embedded within a social, cultural, economic context, and all of that is embedded within a finite environment. I'll explain each of these perspectives in more detail later, but I want to just give you the overview now. This is the mindset of this is called divergent thinking. So you're going to be looking at your core challenge from a number of different perspectives, and don't worry about putting it all together nicely and neatly. In fact, this should be somewhat confusing. If you're feeling that sense of confusion, that's good. I want to point out two different dynamics at work. One is identifying your assumptions about things. So it's really important to get those assumptions down in a journal or wherever you want to put it. I'm not going to collect this, but it's important for you to write down these assumptions and compare that with what we're calling evidence. Evidence can come from research. It could be an article, a peer-reviewed journal article, a chapter in a book. It could be a YouTube video. It could be an interview or a conversation that you have with someone you consider to be an expert. All of that is considered evidence, and you're always looking for the intersection or interaction between the evidence that you discover and your assumptions. Now, that evidence may contradict your assumptions or it may reaffirm them, but in either event, you should be aware of how those two things intersect. Now, another concept or set of terms that we're going to be using is the notion of bearings and path. Think of bearings as a current snapshot, the way things are today. So if I'm thinking about gun violence in Chicago, for example, if that's my core challenge, I'm going to be looking at a period of time, the last week or the last month or something, and that's kind of a current snapshot. The path, however, goes in two different directions. Both historically, to stick with the example of gun violence, what is the history of gun violence in Chicago? So you're looking at a much longer period of time, looking back in history. And also the future, what might that look like? Maybe gun violence, you believe, will increase, maybe it will decrease with more effective policy. But you're noticing three different time frames: past, present, and future. So we're going to use the language of bearings and path to describe that. Further down in the overview section, there's a more detailed explanation of each of those perspectives: personal, organizational, market, society, and environment. And again, here is that a picture of the different perspectives we're going to be taking. Okay, so that's an overview of the Explore Openly tab. And as I said before, we'll go into more detail on each of these perspectives later on. So all of this culminates into two different assignments. One is the annotated bibliography. There's a set of instructions here that explains that. And your research, you're going to be collecting at least 16 different sources. And as I said before, this could be, it should be a combination of things that include some peer-reviewed journal articles. It could be a periodical, a newspaper article from the New York Times or The Economist. It could be a blog. But as you select your sources, make sure that you are critically identifying their value. So just because it's on the internet or a blog post does not give it the same weight. We find this huge divergence, especially with regard to climate change. So the International Panel on Climate Change from the UN is a peer-reviewed scientific journal. This is the highest level of peer-reviewed collection of data. This is very different than the opinion section of a blog. So make sure that as you conduct your research, you are critically evaluating the resource. You'll put these 16 entries in alphabetical order by the author's last name, and you can follow the author date format. You can double check the Chicago Manual of Style, or I don't really care what format it's in as long as it's consistent and one that you've used before. Under each entry, you're going to have a short paragraph that summarizes the key terms and concepts in that article or resource, followed by a couple sentences of how this connects to your challenge question, how you intend to use it. So that's the annotated bibliography. The stakeholder analysis paper then, as you can see here, is broken down into these different sections. And simply put your response beneath here, and you should reference resources in your annotated bibliography here. When I begin to evaluate this, I'm going to be looking at how well you synthesize your research into a coherent perspective, and how well your response addresses each of the instructions here. So pay close attention to the instructions for each of these sections. And in essence, you're writing 5 different mini essays. And that is the stakeholder analysis paper and the annotated bibliography. As with all of the other assignments, if you go under Portfolio Tools and Submit, this will give you an option to choose one of the assignments. Now this template is not enrolled in the course, so the list of assignments doesn't show up here, but that's how you do it.